In Moscow, tanks rolled into the city centre.
Состояние здоровья и исполнения Горбачевым Михаилом Сергеевичем своих обязанностей президента СССР на основании статьи 127.
State television and radio announced that Gorbachev was ill and an emergency committee was now in charge. It looked as though the old, terrifying Soviet dictatorship was back. Boris Yeltsin, who managed to hide in the Russian parliament to avoid arrest, appealed to the outside world for help.
We had managed to get through to him on the telephone, and he said, "I'm in the White House, the Russian White House, and the communists are coming to get me. I have about 20 minutes. Will you go out and tell people what's happening?" And I did. I went out into Downing Street and I made a statement very strongly in support of reform.
As the drama unfolded in Moscow, Gorbachev realized the phones were disconnected and he and his family were under house arrest. He and his wife feared the worst.
They surrounded us with the cars down by the seashore and everywhere. At the entrance they parked cars so nobody could drive past, because there were many people trying to get in, but they wouldn't let anyone through.
Several of our bodyguards deserted us, and we were not sure we could trust those who stayed behind. I didn't know whether they were protecting us or were under orders to guard us. They could have turned their guns on us at any time. They were watching us from every staircase.
But somehow Gorbachev managed to follow the tense drama in Moscow.
I listened mainly to the BBC. I had a Japanese radio. It's in our museum now. I've always trusted the BBC.
In the capital, Boris Yeltsin denounced the coup as illegal and urged people to join him at the White House to defend Russia's fledgling democracy. Thousands gathered, people who realized that after 6 years of Gorbachev's reforms, they had lost their fear. It was this newfound defiance which dealt an ultimate blow to the coup leaders. Parts of the army also refused to fire on the people. Within 3 days it was over. Gorbachev and his family returned to Moscow, but everything had changed. The coup leaders had lost, but so too, it turned out, had Gorbachev.
You could see that Gorbachev wanted to put everything back in order in the country.
Когда он был приглашен Ельциным на заседание, и когда его попытка Горбачева.
And when Yeltsin invited him to a Russian parliament session, he tried to reassert himself and take control.
И попытаться как бы занять там свою позицию.
Краткое изложение заседания Кабинета министров, но я его еще не читал. А вот зачитайте.
Ельцин ему не позволил это.
But Yeltsin wouldn't let him. Instead, he had to sit there, no longer number one, but number two.
Я понял, что...
And that was when I realized that Gorbachev could no longer rely on the power he'd had before, the power of the country's presidency.
Yet Gorbachev seemed to be in denial. He still thought he could keep the Union intact with himself at the helm. Leaders in some Soviet republics were getting restless.
Мне кажется, Ельцин.
I believe it was Yeltsin who brought up the idea in conversation. How about meeting without Gorbachev?
И приняли решение
And we agreed to meet in Belarus.
в Беларуси.
During an informal gathering in a remote hunting lodge deep in the forest, the three presidents from Russia, Ukraine and Belarus dealt a final blow to Gorbachev and to the entire Soviet Union.
А вы не подписали бы, не согласились бы подписаться по такой фразе, что...
Yeltsin said, "Would you agree to the Soviet Union ending its existence?" I said, "Okay," and Kravchuk said, "Okay, too."
Я согласен. Кравчук говорит, я согласен. Как все согласны.
It only really dawned on me afterwards when my car came to take me home what we'd done.
Из Беловежской пущи автомобилем. И думаю так, а завтра же, послезавтра мне надо это...
I was thinking, tomorrow I need to present this to the Belarus parliament, and they could throw it out, because this is a momentous thing we've done.
Чудовищный шаг. И вот здесь я вообще-то даже...
Usually I have a nap in the car, but after that I couldn't sleep.
Что всегда делаю.
It was decided that Belarus President Shushkevich should break the news to Gorbachev, while Yeltsin announced it to the world.
В конце концов, когда меня соединили с Горбачевым, Ельцин, он начал уже разговор с Бушем.
When they finally put me through to Gorbachev, Yeltsin was already on the phone to Bush. I told Mikhail Sergeyevich, and he said, "Can you imagine what the outside world will think of this?"
Что об этом скажет мировая общественность?
In other words, you idiots for getting involved in this.
Лезешь в такие дела вот только-только, и пусть, значит...
And I said, well, actually, Yeltsin is speaking to President Bush right now.
Вот президенту Соединенных Штатов Бушу на том конце провода было...
On the other end of the phone there was a silence,
Потом молчание, потом,
and then he hung up.
значит, распрощались.
Gorbachev had no choice but to resign.
В силу сложившейся ситуации
After 6 years in power, he went on television for the last time as president of the Soviet Union.
прекращаю свою деятельность.
The red flag came down, replaced by the Russian tricolour. Boris Yeltsin, president of Russia, was in charge now. He and Gorbachev never spoke again.
Это уже Борис Николаевича начинается эпоха.
This epic is a story with Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin as its main character. He's a scoundrel and a traitor.
Сидим, договариваемся.
We sat down and worked out how things would be.
Разошлись.
Then we parted, having agreed what we would set in motion.
Он начинает там...
And he began scheming behind my back.
встречи там.
He was a traitor.
Предатель.
I tried to phone him straight away. It was a couple of days later before I actually got him. But I was very sad for him, very sad on a personal level. And very sad because I think I appreciated what he had achieved between 1985 and the time he resigned.
Ну, кто хочет у вас? Выбирает.
20 years on, the last president of the Soviet Union lives quietly in Moscow with his family, and in his 80s he's still heading a political institute. His granddaughter helps him keep abreast of technology. Politically, he's a lonely figure, respected abroad, but blamed by many in his own country for bringing down the Soviet Union. Gorbachev is not nostalgic, but he looks ahead with trepidation. He's scathing about Putin's Russia.
Страна другая должна быть. Путин и его команда.
It should be a different country. Putin and his team are for stability.
Консервация того, что. Получается,
But stability kills development and results in stagnation. I think they've blown it with democracy. The electoral system we had was nothing remarkable, but they have simply castrated it. I apologize for my choice of words, but they really have circumcised it.
He insists his concern is not his own reputation, but the future of his country.
If we miss these next 5 or 6 years, we'll always lag behind. We're on a transitional path to democracy. At best, we're only halfway through.
The man who changed the world, but who lost an empire.
Gorbachev is one of the towering figures of the last half-century because of what he achieved in changing a nation by the force of his own will and determination. In terms of internal reputation, he paid a heavy price for it.
In the eyes of his own people, he will go down in history as the person who destroyed the country. But in the West, where they were always eager to see this country collapse, he is the man who made history.
History is going to be extraordinarily kind to Mikhail Gorbachev and to Eduard Shevardnadze, his foreign minister, because together they made the fundamental decision not to use force to keep the empire together. Had they not made that determination, it's entirely possible that the Cold War could have ended with a bang instead of with a whimper.